Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. Start of a brand new week. But Dominic, we're not looking at the week ahead. We're looking at the weekend that was.
You should do that for every weekend recap.
And not just the weekend that was, but the weekend that is still ongoing as we are recording.
Damn Skippy.
Because even though the fights have already taken place, right now I look happy. Right now I look, I still look like a human being.
Yeah.
But in 24 hours, guys, it could be, Dominic could be riding solo from now on. This could be the end of our show as we know it.
Yeah.
Because if the Bengals lose the Super Bowl tonight, this Below Average Joe will be no mo.
But if they win, I fear the same thing.
Yeah, really. So up front, I did take off not just Monday from work. I took off Tuesday as well because I was like, I'm gonna need another one.
Yeah, an extra recovery.
Pour me another.
Yeah.
And I scheduled a doctor's appointment for Friday. So my boss, when I asked to take those 2 days off, he kind of like knew. He was like, "Oh," he's like, "You need 2 days for that, huh?" And then when I scheduled, I told him I was gonna be out half the day Friday. He goes, "Jesus, what are you planning on getting into?" I was like, "Not related, but
it's a rumble in the jungle, man. The Bengals, baby."
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. But hope everybody enjoys the Super Bowl today.
Yes.
That makes this such one of the biggest sporting weekends of the year.
It is huge.
Yeah, Super Bowl is obviously a huge deal. Rams, Bengals, two teams that haven't been there in a long time. I mean, the Rams 2001 when they lost to the Patriots, and then that was Kurt Warner, greatest show on turf. Marshall Faulk.
Yeah.
Bengals 1988. I mean,
come on, guys.
Time.
Love to see it.
That's obviously not why you guys are here. You guys are here to get that weekend recap from. It's all UFC 271, really. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about, right? That's the whole shebang for.
And what a
for
card!
This one. Yeah, I mean, really was. It was a card that felt like it was going to live up. You had a lot of guys that show a lot of promise on this card. Yeah, there was some big favorites here and there, but really every fight, for the most part, pretty much delivered what you were hoping for, what you expected.
Yeah.
That's why we're going to have a lot to talk about here. I mean,
that's
truthfully.
Right.
But I guess before we, jump right into it, Dominic, how are you recovering from the weekend? You had to drive around quite a bit. Are you?
Yeah.
The drive okay? You feeling all right?
Yeah, drive's good. I mean, got back here in the studio in one piece. Amen. And it was a really fun weekend. Got to catch up with my Valentine, as we discussed on Friday's show, and it was just good quality time. Actually, I wanted to mention this place that we went to on Saturday because if anyone's ever in the Columbus, Dublin, or really there's a few of them throughout Ohio and Midwest, it's called Penn's Mechanical Company. This is not sponsored, but damn, this place is cool because you go in and it's like there's a big row or a wall of like old-fashioned pinball machines, but they're done up like modern day. So there was Deadpool, Marvel, like in-game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all kinds of cool pop culture stuff. They had like a bunch of OG ones from like the 70s and 80s. I'm like, this is badass. Then you turn the corner and there's like 10 little mini bowling lanes. There's 2 ping pong tables. There's a full bar. There's a big, like, not beer pong, but you play with like a soccer ball and you throw it into a trash can. It's just like humongous atmosphere, and the vibes were just really cool. There were a ton of people there. It was nice seeing a lot of people out having fun this weekend. But I just had to mention this place. If anyone's ever near a Penn's Mechanical Company, there's like 7 of them in the Midwest. Highly recommend going to, Noah. As a matter of fact, I'd love to go with you someday.
Oh, yeah. Hey, maybe next year I can be your Valentine and you can take me there.
Deal.
Let's get into those fight announcements, Dom.
Let's do it.
It starts with an unfortunate but silver lining to all this turn of events.
Yes.
And that's our Rafael squared fight that was supposed to headline next Saturday's card on February 19th is unfortunately going to have to be moved for Fiziev. He had some issues getting his visa worked out in time.
Yeah.
So the fight between him and Dos Anjos will be moved to the co-main event of UFC 272. We had talked about how that spot had been open. This is, of course, the pay-per-view headlined by the friends turned enemies.
Hey,
Colby
the
Covington.
promo for that.
Oh yeah, true. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. So now this will be the co-main event, and Dominic, they're keeping it 5 rounds.
Hell yeah. I mean, I love this fight. It's a huge opportunity. You know, Rafael Adesanya, he's been there. He's been in big fights for years. But Fiziev, this is by far his biggest test, his biggest platform. He's getting a co-main event slot on a Masvidal Covington card. It's a very big deal. The fact that they kept it 5 rounds is awesome. Chef's kiss. I'm glad they agreed to keep it that way. And I truthfully think this is just such an awesome fight. You know, it sucks we don't get to see it this coming weekend. But still, to be on that, you know, elevated card is just a big statement for both of those guys. I'm happy for them. I'm excited for that fight.
Yeah, it is a bigger stage for them ultimately. You know, you get put co-main on like a card that is probably going to get a lot of eyes on it from even like a casual viewership. And Dos Anjos is at least a guy that I think a lot of people kind of remember his name. You know, he had the planned bout with Conor, so I think there's still some people that kind of remember him from that. And obviously, if you're a true fan, you just know him as one of the toughest fights in the whole division. And a guy that if you can beat him, that really says a lot about your future. So Fiziev, here he goes. He gets his test, and it's still going to be 5 rounds. It's just on a bigger stage now. So nut up or shut up a little bit.
Exactly.
And for the card next Friday, this is elevated Johnny Walker versus Jamal Hill.
Yep.
So while it's a big blow to the card from top to bottom, it is kind of nice that fight, you know, you have a good co-main event that can be elevated, and therefore it doesn't feel like an outlier.
And I wonder, have they confirmed, will they bump that to 5 rounds, or are they going to keep it 3? I wonder.
As of now, I've not heard that. I doubt it. I'm assuming it's going to remain 3 rounds. I guess that could end up not being the case, but I wouldn't expect it to be. But it's still Johnny Walker, Jamal Hill, 2 guys, you know, they've had a lot of promise.
Yeah, will be Jamal's first main event.
Jamal Hill, this is a big one for him. He's riding high right now, coming off that really just swift knockout of Jimmy Crute. While Johnny Walker's not in the best place, but still someone that you just never can quite count out because he's so explosive, so just wild, and you know he's good. I mean that's what it comes down to. So it should be a fun main event, I think.
Oh yeah.
Following that, March 26th, Dominic.
We got
UFC,
it.
Columbus.
Or we got one, anyway.
Yeah, we did. So this was the card that me and Dominic, along with a group of our buddies, are going to. And the main event had been scrapped between Rakic and Blachowicz. We do get our replacement main event, though, Dominic. 2 top 10 heavyweights, Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus, both guys coming off of knockout losses to Derrick Lewis, actually, fun fact. So,
that's true.
So both looking to bounce back, obviously. They get a main event slot on a pretty big fight night for this year. What are your I guess feelings about this? Does this feel like a good replacement main event? And obviously, I guess, what are your thoughts on the fight in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fight that, you know, it does make sense. It's a little odd. I saw a lot of people that were pretty iffy on it. You know, like you said, they did both get knocked out to Derrick Lewis. I always forget, and I forgot until I looked it up the other day. Curtis Blaydes had that fight in September against Jairzinho Rozenstruik where he did win, but it's like, it's one of those fights where you just don't remember. Sometimes Curtis Blaydes has those type.
Did that happen?
Yeah, he beat Curtis Blaydes in September.
Sorry, I completely forgot about that.
Well, that's the Curtis Blaydes effect. Sometimes, you know, sometimes he gashes a head open in Alistair Overeem, and sometimes
I guess you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, my mistake, Curtis. I apologize.
You know, in a way, still kind of looking to bounce back, just because he's always been there, you know, but he's never been enough to get that title shot or win that big one. So
you're right, but for Curtis, it's like he already is struggling because he doesn't have the most exciting fight style. So he's already kind of working from behind or having to work a little harder. You know, he's got to put up maybe a few more wins than some of his contemporaries.
For sure.
But then you have the setbacks where he's been knocked out twice by the champion, Francis Ngannou.
Yeah.
Then he gets that Derrick Lewis matchup, looks great early, and then gets hit with the massive uppercut that puts him to sleep. And, like, I like Curtis Blaydes. I think he is a very good fighter in this division. I think even I would go as far to say he is a worthy title contender.
Yeah.
But those losses, if they continue to kind of stack up, against guys that are at the top, the forefront of the division, it's just going to be harder and harder to really sell him as like a main event. And you kind of combine that with the fact he's already not the most exciting fighter in the world. It's a tough sell for some people right now. I'm still on board with this, but I'm just saying that, like, I see why people maybe aren't as sold.
Yeah, for sure. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have Chris Daukaus, who was elevated to his biggest spot at the end of 2021 in the main event with Derrick Lewis, gets beat, knocked out in the first round, but he's still getting to fight up against number 4 Curtis Blaydes. So I don't know. I was telling Noah off recording, it kind of just makes me believe, like, maybe the UFC really still does see something in Daukaus. And, I'm not saying he can't be a future title contender. I think he is very good, a very good stand-up fighter and crisp on the feet, but still, to really launch him right back in with a matchup that's not promising for him, because Blaydes is like that for a lot of ways. It is interesting, but, if he wins, he's kind of right back in the saddle, especially when you look at what happened to Derrick Lewis, which we'll get into later. So at the end of the day, I'm glad we got a new main event. It's a 15-fight card right now, which is insane. So we'll see how much of it sticks together come March 26th.
I agree with your point of view about feeling like Daukaus is kind of being tossed right back in the fire a little bit. And it's dangerous because even though he didn't really put up the greatest of showings against Derrick Lewis, the way he lost is kind of the way that, that's just how people go. It's how heavyweight fights go in general. But when you're going up against Derrick Lewis, I mean, sometimes that happens. You just get knocked out. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily stop me from believing that this guy's, got the potential of another title challenger. I really do think pretty highly of Chris Daukaus. And I would hate for people. I felt like it was like the whole discussion before the Lewis fight was, is it Chris Daukaus or Tom Aspinall? It's like the next one. And now that loss to Lewis, I feel like has made everybody kind of shift to where now Tom Aspinall's got this chance coming up the week before.
Yeah,
actually,
that's
this
true.
main event against Volkov. So now everybody kind of is looking at Aspinall as the guy. And while I agree that I think Aspinall probably has a little bit higher of a ceiling, I don't want people to just overlook Daukaus because of that one loss. However, you're giving him a complete opposite matchup here. I mean, now you're going with the hardest wrestling matchup in the division. And again, if he gets squashed here or loses, and if it's kind of in a boring fashion, you kind of just deflated everything you had built up to this point in a way. Yeah. So it's a risky one, and maybe that does add a little bit of stakes to, again, a main event that does feel like a somewhat step down from the one we originally had. But as people that will be in attendance, I'm not going to complain. Yeah. UFC, we wanted a new main event. The UFC gave us a new main event. It's 2 top 10 heavyweights. Both very talented. Both guys that, again, I think could be fighting for a title at some point.
Yeah.
Can I really complain at that point?
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's move on to Bellator. Bellator on May 6th. This is the card that is going to be headlined by Ryan Bader and Czech Congo in their rematch for the Bellator heavyweight title. So the co-main event. Yoel Romero is going to be back, coming off a very, very disappointing first showing.
Yeah.
That was against Phil Davis. And now he is going up against Melvin Manhoef, Dominic. The combined age of this contest
I was waiting on you.
Is it 91 years old? Was that what it was?
I believe so, yeah.
Pretty old is this one. But, Yoel Romero, Dominic, I'm just going to ask you, like, coming off of that loss to Phil Davis, I know you especially, from what I understand, felt like the bigger takeaway from that fight was just how good Phil Davis looked.
For me, it was, yeah.
So now that you got this matchup, and let's remove ourselves from the fact that it's Melvin Manhoef, and we'll get into that. But is Yoel Romero being back? Do you still have a lot of hope, a lot of excitement about seeing Yoel Romero again in Bellator?
I do, but it's way less now. I just fear that, we've seen it time and time again. I feel like lately from Yoel where the output's not there, that explosiveness just isn't there. And, he's getting older. He's less active. He's had the injuries with his eye and whatnot. So things just aren't in his favor per se, and this matchup kind of, I think, explains where he's at in this point in his career. I'm not saying he can't come out and potentially just explode and, knock out Melvin Manhoef, but again, it's like, how much is that really telling us about Yoel's potential? Like, I don't know. When they first signed him, I'm like, this dude can make a splash. He could maybe win the Grand Prix, become a champion.
We were thinking a champion, yeah.
And now, I don't really just get those vibes anymore. At the end of the day, it's Yoel Romero. I love the guy, but it's not that same explosive, dangerous fighter. And again, he could pull a rabbit out of a hat here and pull it out, but right now it's hard to have that hype that I once did.
And remember, Dominic, like I said, your bigger takeaway from his debut was how good Phil Davis looked. So imagine how people are feeling that had the takeaway of like how bad Yoel looked.
Right.
I mean, you already feel like, I guess he's still relevant, but like, is he? I mean, is this kind of the end? Is this like a send off? Is it,
And you're in that other camp, right?
In a way, it's not that I wasn't impressed with Phil Davis, but I do think I probably was more just disappointed in Yoel. And maybe it's one of those things you should see it coming because, again, Yoel, before that, his literally last fight in UFC was for the middleweight title against Israel Adesanya, one of the worst title fights of all time. But again, you kind of go, well, he was fighting for a title. Yeah. And the fight before that, yes, was a loss, but the Paulo Costa, which was an amazing fight.
That's true.
And one that I thought he won. And, to see him fall this hard, at least seemingly, it sucks. It sucks because I really like Yoel Romero. I think he's just one of the all-time scariest fighters, super explosive, just a specimen. And now he's going up against Melvin Manhoef, who also was at one time kind of like that.
Yeah, true.
Again, a guy who, if you're a pretty much strictly UFC viewer, you may not really know the name, but this guy at one time was one of the scariest fighters in the world, just putting people to sleep like bad. Mm-hmm. And now he's kind of this washed up guy. He was the one that debuted again, or welcomed Corey Anderson to Bellator. And it was like, why is Corey Anderson fighting Melvin Manhoef? And Corey Anderson kind of just cut through him like a knife through butter. But here it's maybe the best thing I can say about this fight is that it feels like one of these guys is probably not making it to the judges' scorecards. And when I say that, like, I have a hard time seeing Melvin finish Yoel. I feel like this is the matchup where if Yoel's going to have this kind of late rally to his career, this late, highlight reel to add to the highlight reel that he already has built up. This is the fight to do it because Melvin is, again, a guy who's been finished a lot at this point. He's old, a little washed up, but if you get the kind of fight that we kind of fear we might, where you have two guys who were at one point specimens that are now just, fighting like two guys at the nursing home fighting over fucking bread or something. I mean,
right.
It's not necessarily going to be very good. So, and it kind of makes you think, Dominic, like the people that book these fights a lot of times know more. They're on the inside. They know a little bit more than we do. So you kind of wonder when they book Yoel against someone like Melvin Manhoef, even though it's a co-main event slot, whatever. It kind of makes you wonder, like, what do they know? Like, they must kind of be thinking, man, we don't have much here anymore,
Yeah, and I was about to ask kind of too, what if Yoel were to go in here and lose this? Then it's like, okay, two of the biggest signings Bellator's really ever done in free agency last year with him and Rumble Johnson. Neither one thus far, could potentially pan out. I know Rumble did have a win, but then he had the injury and never got to have the big fights that they wanted. But Yoel lost his debut. If he goes out here and loses to Manhoef, then you're like, oh, shit. I would have never – when Bellator did those two contract signings, I would have never guessed this is the question I'd be asking at this point in time.
I agree with you. I think the jury's still out on Rumble Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that weird thing where he got arrested.
That's true. Forgot about that.
Bellator fight. Weird stuff there. You guys can look that up on your own time. But and then, yes, you're right. It's kind of delay. There's been a big delay in really getting him going. So I still have some hope for Rumble Johnson. But for Yoel, it's just, even with a win here, like I'm not exactly like, getting overjoyed for the next Yoel Romero fight. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe he comes out and looks fantastic.
Maybe he'll pull out a flying knee like he did against Chris Weidman.
8 days later, May 14th, 2 top 15 strawweights. And it's an interesting one because Virna, Jandiroba, and Angela Hill.
Angela Hill, back again.
11 versus 12. How many times do I feel like I'm going to have to say, Dominic, is this a must-win for Angela Hill? Because, again, I understand. Like, she must have the worst luck of
dude.
Any fighter ever. I mean, the amount of split decisions that, not just split decisions where, like, they're really close, but ones where I've been like, oh, yeah, I think Angela Hill won that, and she's lost, is pretty staggering at this point.
Yeah.
And now she's going up against Virna, who's another tough opponent who is coming off a loss to Hebus, but still good. And I just have to wonder, like, is this a must-win for Angela Hill to kind of keep being a relevant fighter in this division?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people love Angela Hill. I'm a fan. The UFC seems to love her. But if she were to lose this, that is 3 in a row, regardless of if it's a split, if it's a unanimous. If the judges' scorecards say she loses, and yes, I'm automatically assuming this fight will go the distance. I'm sorry, people. That's just that's what I'm imagining. But and Virna is a good fighter, man. This is an interesting kind of clash, and Angela Hill is still getting older. I think 37 or 38 now. So the end of the road is near, regardless if she wins or loses. But yes, again, we've probably asked this before on the podcast, and we'll say it again here, because how many fights have we covered of Angela Hill since we started this show? She fights so damn much. It feels like a must-win for her, and one where Jandiroba is just kind of looking to bounce back after a loss against Hebus, where, by the way, that was a pretty fun scrap too. So I'll be curious to see how this will play out. And Angela Hill is always in these types of fights. Number 10 through 15, she's probably fought every single person that's ever held that standing since the beginning of this weight class. So we'll see what happens, man.
Yeah, I expect a fun one there, though. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get into some more news. We'll start with Kayla Harrison in the PFL. We had the last time we talked about Kayla Harrison, I don't believe we ever addressed the all but signed
I don't think
that
so.
Ariel had reported. But basically before that, we were still kind of speculating. And it was starting to look like, okay, Kayla Harrison may be returning to the PFL. It was starting to kind of look like we were going in that direction. But there was still some hope. I mean, we had a comment the other day I saw you respond to where someone was still kind of holding out hope
for the
UFC to sign Kayla Harrison just because the biggest promotion in the world, you want the best of the best talent to be in the best of the best, talent pool. However, Ariel Helwani had reported it was probably like 3 weeks ago or a month ago now that it was all but done. The deal to return Kayla Harrison to the PFL. And then you saw the PFL had re-signed with ESPN Plus.
Yeah, that's the part we talked about. Yeah.
And the PFL's been kind of expanding. They're on Fubo TV now with their new Contender series.
Yeah, that starts
show.
this week. Yeah.
And then they just had a new deal over in the UK with Channel 4 to air their shows on that channel. So big moves for the PFL, really expanding. And I think that's great. However, unfortunately, Dominic, this deal with Kayla Harrison is not done, and that's the thing. All but done, but all but. And because that negotiations with the PFL have reportedly hit multiple 11th hour snags. Like literally one gets resolved and then another one came up. This is all being, again, credit to Ariel Helwani. I heard he was talking about this on the Ringer MMA podcast, which you guys should check that out if you haven't. It's a really, really good show. But basically, multiple things came up with this negotiation with the PFL. And then, Dominic, another offer came in at the last second.
Oh, boy, Scott
Coker.
Coker.
It wasn't, not the UFC, though, but from Bellator. Bellator trying to swoop in like a bandit in the night, like the Colts leaving Baltimore, trying to just swoop on in. And because of that, PFL's not out of it. But now you got, again, another competitive free agency going on again. So as it stands, do you have any sort of feeling one way or another? Is there any hope that maybe she does move on to Bellator, go on to the next chapter? Or are you kind of hoping that the PFL keep her because of how important she is for not just what they built, but what they're obviously expanding on at this point?
Yeah, this is very interesting, man, and I can't help but get excited about the Bellator offer because originally that was kind of what I was most excited for Kayla, because they have a full roster of featherweights. They have Chris Cyborg. So not only is there a big fight opportunity, but there's other fights we can see Kayla have after or before she fights Cyborg. And I can't help but bring up a little soundbite I heard of a interview she had with someone from MMA Junkie, if I'm not mistaken, where she said there was originally a plan in place where she wanted to do multiple belts, multiple weight classes, multiple organizations in 2022. And now that Bellator's back in the running, do we see her maybe do a fight in PFL? Maybe against I forget who was one of their new signees that came in at the end of the year.
Who you're talking
was it
about.
Julia Budd?
Yep, Julia Budd.
So, does she maybe defend I don't know. They don't really, defend belts in PFL, but, could she do that there and then maybe go to fight Cyborg and Bellator? So now I'm kind of maybe something like that could still happen, but regardless, it is exciting, and I think this, at the end of the day, just shows how big of a potential star these organizations see in Kayla Harrison, man.
Yeah, very true. I mean, she is being treated like a big deal, and
it's crazy.
Now, the only thing stopping that kind of partnership where she maybe has a couple fights for Bellator and the PFL is the promoters themselves. That's the only thing stopping that.
Yeah.
I mean, these promoters can team up if they want. They can co-promote.
Yeah.
Only certain promotions you see do it. I mean, the UFC has, again, been one of those that pretty much will never do it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's because of the history when they tried to do it with Pride back in the day, kind of got screwed. Left a bad taste in their mouth. And plus, they're so big that, why they don't
There's
really
no need
to.
for,
but they did, co-promote the McGregor-Mayweather boxing fight, So these promoters are capable of doing it. So that deal could be in place, but I'm not very confident that will happen. Now, Bellator is one of the companies that has done it.
Yeah.
Kyoji Horiguchi was fighting over in Ryzen and came over and became the Bellator champion, wasn't able to defend, but, that was while he was still in Ryzen.
Yeah.
So, as it stands now, I can't help but want this move to Bellator to happen.
I know, man.
It kind of felt like when I heard that she was all but signed to the PFL again, or all but re-signed to the PFL, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Mm-hmm. Just a little bit.
That competition factor,
Yeah, it's just okay, maybe her and Julia Budd could be an interesting fight, but again, you're going to get the Jenna Fabians of the world, these other women. No disrespect, Jenna, because that's the only person I mentioned, but just the rest of these women's lightweights who just aren't on the same level as her. And it's okay, I guess this is going to be kind of her legacy, is just to be this monstrous woman in this division that nobody else can really touch. And her legacy is just going to be being the most dominant fighter in the PFL's history, and she'll be the face of that organization, and she could end up being a pretty big star just by doing that.
Yeah.
But I think this move to Bellator is kind of a must, because the biggest fight for her at this point is Chris Cyborg.
Oh, and that's...
and honestly, that might be regardless of promotion. I mean, after Amanda Nunes lost to Juliana Pena, I'm starting to think that this is just the biggest fight in general.
Yeah, I agree.
Chris Cyborg. Now, again, I was a proponent of maybe not doing that fight right away.
Yeah.
I still am kind of mixed feelings on the whole thing, because part of me wants to see her debut against someone like Kat Zingano, who I know is would potentially be screwed in this situation because she's supposed to be fighting for a title next. But I also see the promoter's point of view of but what if she loses to Kat Zingano and then we just squashed a huge money-making opportunity?
Yeah.
We know Kayla Harrison's fantastic, but we don't know if she's really ready for literally one of the best women in the entire world. You just don't. But if that fight does happen, if she signs to Bellator, Oh my gosh! I mean, that might be the biggest fight in Bellator history, Dominic.
Her versus Cyborg, that'd be
Yes.
massive.
I would actually go as far to say that is the biggest fight in Bellator history. I could be wrong. I just started really watching MMA in this capacity in like 2016, and I know they had some pretty decent sized fights before that. But as far as since I've been watching,
Yeah.
this fight would be on people's radar, and I can't think of another Bellator fight that's really. Besides maybe, I mean, Pitbull McKee was pretty big, but even that was limited,
Right. Yeah. And Cyborg is still one of the biggest names in the entire Bellator organization, and Kayla is the biggest free agent potentially that we've ever seen in MMA, but just obviously this year too. So I can't help but be excited. And at the end of the day, we got to be getting close, right? Something's going to come out sooner or later because the PFL season, it's starting up in like April. We gotta get the ball rolling here. So I'm excited.
Well, let's not gloss over the fact either. And I agree with you. Like, excited on the potential of her going to Bellator, but let's not gloss over the kind of blow this could potentially be to the PFL.
She is the face of their company.
She's the face of the company. Now, luckily for them, they did re-sign with ESPN before she potentially leaves.
Yeah.
But considering they're doing all this expansion and stuff, I mean, do you think this is like a big enough loss to where you're talking like detrimental, like to where they're potentially scrambling to even stay alive for the next couple of years as they look to build up a Brendan Loughnane or whoever to kind of fill those shoes as much as they can?
That's actually a really interesting question because she is undoubtedly the biggest name over there. Yeah, they have some decent names, but really, like, their free agents that they signed last year didn't do so hot, including Anthony Pettis. So it's hard to, kind of back them when you already have a proven champ in Kayla. So I don't want to go as far as like detrimental, like, oh no, the downfall of the PFL could be upon us. But I definitely think, especially for 2022, it would be a big hit considering all of this new momentum that they've garnered. Definitely slows it down just a bit.
And I can't help but kind of chuckle at the idea that if Kayla Harrison were to, in the next few weeks, sign with Bellator, I'm assuming the plans are already in place, the rosters are already in place for this season of the PFL. So you would still end up with a lightweight tournament, lightweight division. So one of these women would end up getting $1 million.
And you got to think Julia Budd may just be the front runner.
She may be, but it's just like the idea that they would have to give $1 million to someone who is probably not at the caliber of a champion.
Okay.
Very interesting. But hopefully we finally get some resolution here. I mean, we've been talking about this for like 3 or 4 months. I think the PFL championships were at the end of October.
Yep.
And ever since then, it's been Kayla Harrison free agency. And here we are midway through February, and
it's crazy.
No decision's been made. But I respect Kayla making the moves, though. She's doing good.
I mean, she's trying to get the bag, and
she's planting seeds. She's doing the right business moves here. I love it.
Yes, for sure.
One more piece of news. I think the headline's kind of funny.
I see what you were doing there.
So yeah, let's talk about Joe Rogan. Because he's one of the biggest personalities in the sport,
and in the world,
in the world, and one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Obviously, he's been in the news a lot. And we're just gonna come right out front and just say that, like, me and Dominic are not gonna tell anybody we're not in any place to tell anybody how they should feel about all the noise that's been going on with Joe Rogan over the past few months, but really over the past week or so. But since it kind of, what do you want to call it, like seeped in or
snowballed
into where it is kind of affecting or changing things in the UFC, I figured it would be worth to at least address that portion of it here.
Yeah.
So basically what happened was, and again, all credit to the Ringer for this one, the Ringer MMA podcast. I got to give him the credit. Ariel kind of planted the seed, or accidentally did, or something, and then it kind of later came out that basically Joe Rogan, citing a scheduling conflict, was not going to be appearing on the broadcast for UFC 271. And a lot of people made the assumption that, well, Disney or ESPN basically forced the UFC to have him step away due to a lot of the heat going on with him right now. But then at the post-fight press conference, Dana White said, no, there was no scheduling conflict. He's like, Joe Rogan could have worked this weekend. He said Joe Rogan did not want to work this weekend, and then they asked him well, will he be back for UFC 262? And he goes, the next time Joe Rogan wants to work, he will be working. He's pretty much doubled down. So I guess the question right now, Dominic, is I was surprised, and here's why. Because even though everything going on with him, really it's always felt like no matter what's going on in the socio-political world, it always has felt like it's kind of avoided the UFC. Like Dana has been pretty big proponent for free speech as he sees it, and has, because of that, a lot of the noise that goes on in a lot of our other sports, a lot of that socio-political climate doesn't really seem to. It almost feels like the UFC is separated from it all.
Yeah, it doesn't affect them much.
Yeah. So I was surprised when I heard this, because I didn't see really any fighters or fans necessarily clamoring for Rogan to be removed from the broadcast.
Yeah.
Even the people that were, again, being critical of him in the public weren't really targeting him on the UFC broadcast. They were targeting his podcast on Spotify.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was just completely separate. So when this happened, I was like, well, it didn't really add up to me, because I was like, even if there was pressure from ESPN, from Disney, whatever, to remove him, at the end of the day, that's the call that Dana has to make, and I don't see him making that call to remove Rogan from the broadcast because of how loyal he is to Joe Rogan. So knowing now that it was probably, at least if we are to believe everything at face value here, that Joe Rogan himself stepped away, can we safely say right now, Dominic, that this is just kind of a one-off, and hopefully Rogan will be back in his normal capacity moving forward? Or is this going to be something lingering for a while, perhaps?
Yeah, I'd like to think it was just a one-off. At the end of the day, you said kind of the worst of the worst has been happening the past 1 or 2 weeks, where it's just been really crazy. He's like the most talked about person in the world, I feel like right now, at least on social media. So I wasn't surprised when they necessarily said it, that he wasn't on the broadcast, but at the same time I was like, oh, scheduling conflict. That's interesting that it happened. Right? Yeah. But then that Dana came out and said Joe kind of chose not to do it. I do kind of see Joe. I could see Joe doing that. He's a guy that's very loyal to the UFC, loves the sport, loves the fighters, and I feel like if there's any time where he feels he may be taking away shine, he could kind of step away. And I'm sure he has a lot of shit going on right now anyway behind the scenes. So maybe he just had to take care of some stuff. And he didn't want to hinder any broadcast. He did kind of throw Michael Bisping under the bus because he had 1 day to prepare and get to the fights.
Right.
But, overall, I see it as just kind of a short-term thing. Maybe not back by March 5th for the big fights. I sure hope so, because that's a massive card with Covington and Masvidal. But, maybe we see him kind of step away for a few more fights than what we're used to. But we've kind of seen that lately anyway from Joe. So at the end of the day, I don't make too much of it. I think we see Joe back in there sooner rather than later.
I would expect the same thing. And I think one of the reasons for that is his podcast is still going.
Yeah.
Despite really, what is ultimately being a lot of boycotting and a lot of noise, he's still doing new episodes. So I'm again, it just surprised me because I didn't feel like that was the response people were pushing for.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost seemed unnecessary, I guess. But again, I don't know. You decide, I guess, if you felt like that was a good or bad move. But you're probably right. I think maybe with everything going on, maybe he just didn't really have the time to prepare himself either.
Yeah.
So I could really see that. I guess once you started to kind of say that, I'm like, yeah, I guess it is just a really bad time to try and
to have a pay-per-view.
But yeah, hopefully I'm speaking for myself here. I mean, I would just like to see him back because I just love the job he does for the UFC. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, he adds value to the show, man.
yeah, but I will say props to Michael Bisping for stepping in on such
Yeah.
short notice. I love Michael Bisping on commentary.
Yeah.
I've said that he's my favorite of the one of my favorites.
Fighters turned
commentary. Yeah, I mean, I love all of them. I mean, really, it's like picking your favorite child, right?
You're right.
But Michael Bisping is it's probably my favorite personality of the four, at least, and for him to kind of get that opportunity on pay-per-view was his first shot at pay-per-view. I thought he did a good job. I know there was some criticism of his commentary for the main event, but you know, because I think it all came down to he was kind of being critical of Robert Whittaker, trying to say he should be more active or more aggressive, which is, I think most people have kind of assumed was not the right move because that's what he did the first fight. I don't know, but I digress. The guy had such short time to prepare. I thought he was great. I thought it was still I will say, I think Rogan would be okay with this and would be happy with this. It didn't feel like there was something missing because Rogan was gone. I think everybody did a good job despite that.
You know, and that's how, when Joe hasn't been at these shows like last year, that's how it felt. You miss Joe, obviously, and his connection with Anik and DC. But at the end of the day, the production from the UFC's top tier and their commentators, regardless of what combination you have, are always up to par with any other sports league there is. So.
And it was interesting. I mean, he kind of still made his way onto the commentary. Did you see where, I know you said you were listening with the volume down. Did you see or hear about Anik bringing up, I guess Joe texted them during the main event?
Oh, did he really?
He texted him because I guess Izzy, you know how Izzy does that thing with like his right hand where he like kind of...
Oh, yeah, they thought he hurt his hand or something?
Yeah, so Rogan texted him and said that he thought Izzy might have like broken his hand or something.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing Izzy do that a lot, so I was kind of like, it's kind of...
Well, he said post-fight, he's like, I'm just loading up the power or whatever, so...
Yeah, but... we'll just go ahead and move on to UFC.
Speaking of Izzy,
since we're talking about it, the main event of the evening, the rematch, much anticipated between Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. It goes the distance, and Israel Adesanya gets the victory once again. This time via unanimous decision. And Dominic, I mean, right off the top, the fight was a bit what I expected. I expected this. I expected Robert Whittaker to do a better job here than he did in the first fight.
Yep.
And I think I can say he did.
Yep.
I expected it to go all 5 rounds. I thought neither guy was going to really give an inch here, was going to allow himself into any sort of vulnerable position that could potentially be a fight-ending sequence. And I didn't expect a ton of action. I know you probably had maybe a little bit
more, yeah.
Hope for that, but I just kind of thought this was very much the kind of fight I thought we were going to get. I thought it was fine. I was very much invested the whole time, all 5 rounds. I was intrigued at what was happening. I enjoyed seeing kind of Whittaker's late push, the championship rounds where he kind of really pushed it in the end. But
rounds were close, man.
Very close rounds, and kind of surprisingly, considering this was the Texas judges who had been who, I guess to their credit, never got a fight wrong all night, but had some weird scorecards, and we've seen this is the place that didn't give Dominic Reyes the win over John Jones. So very much was like when the scorecards were getting read off, you're kind of sitting there on the edge of your seat like, oh my gosh.
Especially when you have a parlay and bet on the line.
Exactly. So I'm going to let you give your chance to talk about the fight. And I guess we'll start with the champion, Israel Adesanya. This is 4 title defenses for him now. You're the biggest Anderson Silva fan, I know.
Yeah.
And from
I take great pride in that, Noah.
Yes. So from your perspective, being that you're such a big Anderson Silva fan, how close with this win is Israel Adesanya in sort of surpassing Anderson Silva as the best middleweight of all time or one of the best fighters in UFC history?
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes to automatically point directly to the quantitative numbers first. Well, Anderson has 10 title defenses. Israel has 4. He's got 6 to go, right? He can't be better until he reaches that. There's way more to it than that, especially at this day and age with the competition. So while he's closing the gap, much like Usman is closing the gap with GSP, there's still plenty of room left to go for Israel Adesanya. But I can't help but, take away from this fight after watching it that right now in 2022, this man is one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. He is a top-notch talent. This fight to me was very much a technical chess match back and forth. It felt like the two best middleweights in the world. And that's what we got to see to me. Yes, the output wasn't what I expected based on my epiphany that I've been talking about all year. But it did go 5 rounds back and forth, super razor thin. So Adesanya, man, he's the king of the middleweights right now. And whilst I think he can potentially reach Anderson Silva in terms of like where I feel an all-time great status, there's still plenty of room left to go. And, for Israel, he's hinted at wanting to move up to 205. He's obviously done it once and failed, but I still think we're going to see him do it again. We saw Anderson Silva succeed there numerous times, not for a title, but there are just so many similarities between these two. When they fought, it felt like that passing of the torch. So this is the modern day, almost version of Anderson Silva with a few less finishes in the UFC, but he's dominant. 4 title defenses is a ton. Not a lot of people do that, even though it seems like a small number. So while he's getting closer, he's not quite there yet. But again, man, what a performance by him. It just feels like every time I see Adesanya step in there, of course, at middleweight, that is, I just have new takeaways from him. He is just so good and continues to improve every time. Regardless of how close the fight is, there's something new we see from him.
Yeah, I that's a good way to put it, because not every fight is the most exciting fight in the world. This one wasn't. The Marvin Vettori rematch wasn't. The Yoel Romero fight certainly wasn't.
Your shit sandwich.
But he's must-see TV, in my opinion.
He is, man. He is.
He's at that point where even if it's not the most exciting fight, you're almost just in awe of how good he really is. Mm-hmm. And this fight was kind of a delight for that, not just for him, but for Robert Whittaker as well, because especially for the first 3 rounds or so, it just felt like Izzy just was a step ahead. Just Robert, you could see the improvements, you could see the effort, the game plan, but it just seemed like a guy who just simply had no answers.
Yeah.
But then he did start to find success in the championship rounds, getting those takedowns, and ultimately, even when Adesanya would pretty much make his way back up immediately, using that closed distance to at least try to land something worthwhile. And that did start to have some success for him in the later rounds. But this fight really just, it solidified that you're right, the 2 best in the world, and ultimately Adesanya being just the best in the world. There's just a pretty decent gap between number 1 and number 2.
Yep.
As far as him being compared to Anderson Silva, this again I think is just a product of MMA. Unfortunately, doesn't have much resonance for the past. They don't seem to have much of a sense of nostalgia, and in some ways that can be good, because you kind of, like we've talked about in the past, we grew up being wrestling fans, and I think a big problem that a lot of fans that are still watching today seem to have with the product is that they don't really build up their stars of today. They keep going back to the Goldbergs and Brock Lesnar's and people that were big 20 years ago. So in a way, it's like a blessing that MMA is so focused on building the stars of today.
Yes.
But it gets a little frustrating when it comes to like GOAT status and talking about all-time greats, because it feels premature, in my opinion, for these comparisons between Adesanya and Silva. Not comparisons by himself, because he is very much like the modern day Anderson Silva. The passing of the torch was pretty much him beating Silva. You're completely justified to make comparisons, but to even for me to even, if you even are so much as considering thinking that he is above Anderson Silva, I think that's just a little premature.
You need to get on Fight Pass.
Anderson Silva is a top 3 fighter in UFC history. Yeah. Adesanya is certainly making his way there, but if I'm being honest, like, is Adesanya, if you were to list out your top fighters of all time, he's probably in the top 20.
Yes.
But, again, I'm not quite ready to say that he's like one of the all-time best. Now, he certainly has the potential to get there.
Oh, yes.
And if he keeps going at this rate and staying as active as he wants to be, he's talking about wanting to fight in June, which I know we're going to talk about. That's just going to make it all the more quicker to get there.
Yes.
And, of course, if he goes back up to light heavyweight, if he were to win a title there.
Then we're talking, you know.
Yeah, we're really getting into some stuff there. But as it stands right now, he is a fantastic fighter, one of the best pound for pound today, but I'm not quite ready to say he's like the best middleweight of all time.
Yeah.
I just think it's a bit premature. And I think what's unfortunate for him, I kind of told you this off recording. I'm going to try to see how I can articulate this right now. It's going to be hard for Adesanya to really reach Anderson Silva, not just because it's hard to get to that many title defenses or anything like that, but it's more so just because when you really look ahead, and I know every division may go through this with a dominant champion, and you know it feels like, oh, where's the true contenders left? And right now, Adesanya's got Jared Cannonier, and then he's got Sean Strickland. And compared to the other divisions, like welterweight, who's got these studs on the way up, not only is Kamaru Usman likely fighting Leon Edwards next, but you have Khamzat Chimaev coming up. You have Shavkat Rakhmonov on his way up.
You still have Luque in there and all these other
guys. Yeah, Vicente Luque, perhaps Bilal Muhammad. I mean, there's guys in there.
Yes.
And even if, like, for God's sakes, I mean, even Stephen Thompson could still go on and run. It's and even a rematch with Gilbert Burns is interesting. And, like, there are still plenty of matchups that could really boost Kamaru Usman's all-time status.
And they're all very much exciting.
Yes. While for Adesanya, I just think the middleweight division is just a little thinner. And there's not those big prospects that I'm looking at right now. Like, Dricus du Plessis, I think, a very interesting one, but he still feels much further away than, like, Khamzat is right now.
Maybe, like, Alex Pereira, there's that history with him and Izzy, Bruno Silva.
Darren Till's still a guy that I want to have hope for. But then, and I still think a fight with him and Izzy is interesting, but, you got to put the wins together. Yeah. If Kelvin Gastelum could ever go on a winning streak, like, I'd love to see them have a rematch. Just
and see, but, as you're saying this, it's in my head, I'm just like, there's many more what ifs for Israel than there is for, like, a Kamaru Usman,
So it's just going to be hard when you're talking about legacy building for Israel to really get. I mean, he can still climb just by stacking up wins, but it's just not going to. He's not going to be able to move as, like, he's not going to be able to jump so far by simply beating Jared Cannonier and Sean Strickland. Like, he should beat those guys theoretically. Yeah. But if he goes up to light heavyweight and beats Yuri Prohaska, Glover Teixeira, or Jan Blachowicz, or Alexander Rakic, whoever, all of a sudden you kind of go, oh, okay.
Here we go. Yeah.
Now you're talking legacy again, winning a second belt. So it feels like he has done so much work in building that legacy up to this point that it's going to be really hard for him to continue at that rate moving forward, no matter how active he is, just because the threats aren't really there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
But let's talk about Robert Whittaker, because he's in a very interesting spot now, unfortunate spot.
Yeah.
He respectfully felt like he had done enough to win. So I guess maybe I should have asked you this at the forefront. How did you score the fight?
Yeah, we saw people throwing around that word robbery again. So, some people, not as many, but just a few. Because one of our loyal listeners, Michael, actually messaged me on Facebook talking about this fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we kind of went back and forth, and I'm like, yeah, man, I personally had it 4-1 Izzy, minimum 3-2. I love Robert Whittaker. He did do a lot of good things, and these rounds were close. But it just, like, at the end of that fight, it felt Adesanya won this fight. As a whole, he won this fight. So I think the judges got it right. I don't necessarily see Whittaker, winning that, but as respectfully as he is, he did kind of say that he thought he won, and it was close, just not close enough for me personally. And did you kind of score it the same way?
Yeah, I think I said 3-2 Izzy. I can't remember now, but I think it was 3-2 Izzy. I said, and truthfully, even though I had it, one more round for Whittaker, I just can't really see where you scored this fight for Robert Whittaker. I understand maybe rooting for him And again, these rounds were very close, but I can't help but feel like anybody scoring this fight for Whittaker, they kind of clung to those moments, to those kind of moments he would have, rather than looking at the round as a whole. Because you get excited at the potential of a takedown, but then as he gets right back up. And I saw Chael Sonnen thought Robert Whittaker won this fight.
Really?
Shaw thought Robert Whittaker won this fight. Of course, Chael did, because Chael is a wrestler, and
true.
Robert Whittaker did do a pretty good job of getting the takedowns, but just it was getting any sort of damage or any sort of submission attempts. He had that one where he kind of was riding on the back, and again, though, he got kind of flung off, and that was it. So, okay, so we're on the same page. We both scored it for Israel Adesanya, but Robert Whittaker still respectful in the post fight, but feeling like he had done enough to win and still coming up short.
That's a tough spot.
What I'm just gonna ask you, I guess there's no real other way to word this. I mean, what if you're in Robert Whittaker's shoes, or as a fan of Robert Whittaker? I mean, where does he go from here? Because this is, he's a guy that started his career at 170 pounds.
Yeah.
He moved up because, again, it was just he wasn't really at his peak performance at 170 pounds. But by all means, 185 is like, he's not going up from here, I don't think.
No,
I think this is the division for him. I don't see him anywhere else but 185 pounds.
Yeah.
So now that you've been clearly bested twice by a dominant champion, and now you're sort of in this Rich Franklin, Joseph Benavidez sort of status, I mean, where does he really go next?
Knowing Bobby Knuckles, I think he just keeps taking on contenders until he gets another title shot. I mean, I almost view him as like a Max Holloway right now, like a Colby Covington, where they're the clear second best guy in that division, and they're still like leaps and bounds above the, like, Robert Whittaker bested for the most part Jared Cannonier over the course of 3 rounds outside of getting hurt. Jared Cannonier won last night and is probably getting the next title fight. But I still feel like overall Robert Whittaker's better. You know what I mean? I still think Robert Whittaker better than Sean Strickland. Maybe we see him fight Sean Strickland, truthfully.
Yeah.
But I think he's still there, welcoming not like up and comers, because he's going to be the guy. He's not a gatekeeper, but he in a sense is like a gatekeeper to, you want to get a title shot? I'm sitting right here at number 1. Because, by the way, I never lost my number 1 spot in the rankings, and he probably still won't, even after Cannonier's win that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. So I think he's just still right there. For God's sakes, he could tally off 3 more wins and fight for another belt. Who knows, is he still the champ by then or not? But he is so good. He's still in his prime, I think 31 or 32. And you look at all he's accomplished, which relates him even more to what Max Holloway is right now in terms of standing. So I think he just kind of sits right there, and you want a title shot? I'll be right here waiting for you,
I think you're partially on the right track. I do wonder, though, if you're a guy if you're at the UFC and you're booking fights for Robert Whittaker, if you have a guy who is looking like maybe he could be a title challenger for Izzy, do you risk having him fight Robert Whittaker knowing that you're not going to give Robert Whittaker a title fight if he wins, Yeah. So it's kind of like, so that makes it interesting. Is like, okay, what matchups do you want to put Robert Whittaker in? Because, you're potentially risking a title challenger in the process. I think a perfect matchup, if I'm looking ahead, him and Marvin Vettori.
I know, that's perfect. A good fight, man.
2 guys that obviously have lost to the champion twice. They are 2 of the top dogs in this division, both so talented, but really aren't fighting for a whole lot of anything right now, unfortunately, besides holding ground.
Yep.
So you have those 2 fight. I think that's an excellent main event, second half of 2022. I would be all about that. But I guess in the long-term outlook, I mean, you're right. There's really not much else for him to do. Again, I don't think him moving up or down a division is really in the question. There is the hope probably for Izzy to leave the division, and then maybe that opens the door for you. But you can't really, prepare for that. So I think what really hurts, though, Dominic, is it took him 3 wins to get this second fight. So how many is it going to take for him to
get a third?
He's ready for a third fight. And then you look at all the contenders around him. I mean, he hasn't fought Marvin Vettori. He hasn't fought Sean Strickland. But then I mean, he's fought Cannonier.
Yep.
Well, I guess he hasn't fought Paulo Costa, but
He was
Costa's
supposed to
status,
at least. Yeah.
Costa's status is a bit up in the air. Went over being overweight 20 pounds and whatnot. But,
Yeah.
he fought Brunson. He fought Gastelum. He fought Darren Till. Like, there's not a ton of guys in the immediate future for him. So, yes, for the rest of this year, maybe you have a couple fights that you could potentially do with him. But we just need some, and this is the same thing I was talking about for Izzy. We just need some shakeup in this division to kind of freshen things up. Just things. I don't want things to get too stale here because you got a lot of guys kind of sitting here, not moving around a lot, ranking.
Yeah, and when you have a champion, and when you have a champion like Izzy who wants to keep fighting, it's like, well, shit, guys, come on, we got to churn out contenders for me to keep defending the belt. So. Yeah.
So, I mean, and Robert Whittaker is just the ultimate professional, so I don't see this hindering him too much. I don't see this deflating him too far and making him, not the same fighter moving forward.
Yeah.
He obviously feels confident in what he did here in this fight, and, he said as much afterwards. He said, look, he's like, we're the two best in the division. I know it. He knows it. So I think for him, there's always going to be that hope that, if you win enough times, you do get a third fight. And it is interesting. You compared it to, a Max Holloway, who it's kind of a similar situation, but yet, Max Holloway got it. Well, I guess as of now, he hasn't gotten a third fight. But,
true.
Everybody was so sure that a third fight was in reach. And I know the second fight with Volkanovski, that is, for Max Holloway, was razor thin, and a lot of people thought Max won. But he technically didn't. So it's kind of funny that everybody was so on board with Max getting a third fight and saying that was in reach. But for Robert, it feels it feels like it's a mile away. At this point. So
definitely.
It'll definitely be a long journey back. And again, it could be as long as Izzy is really here. If he goes up a division, then things might change. But a tough loss, but I still plenty of big fights left for him.
Yeah, and now we have more middleweights to discuss.
We're shaking the order up. We're gonna get into the feature bout because it was essentially a title eliminator here. As Jared Cannonier does get the knockout with the elbows over Derek Brunson. 4 minutes 29 seconds of round number 2. Jared Cannonier kind of staking his claim, saying I'm the number one contender, and he did it in pretty brutal fashion. But Dominic, it did not come easy.
Yeah.
Derek Brunson, I thought, looked great early in this fight.
Yes.
Round 1, it was a tale of 2 rounds. I mean, it really was. Right, round 1, Derek Brunson, right away, what stood out to me, much bigger than Jared Cannonier, despite what I was saying on Friday about how Jared Cannonier had fought at heavyweight and light heavyweight.
Yeah.
And yet he did not look like
Brunson's thick.
Brunson's a big guy, and it showed. But he was relentless in getting those takedowns, and he didn't secure all of them. But Cannonier was sort of having to play defense for most of the round. He almost didn't want to throw to. Didn't want to get overzealous with his striking, because if you throw a little bit too much in your combinations, then all of a sudden Derek Brunson is shooting for a takedown and you're going down. And that happened a couple times. A couple nice ones, one nice slam in particular. And, things were looking a little dicey at the end of that round.
Brunson he even dropped Cannonier with the uppercut, too.
Oh, yes, correct. I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, Brunson having moments in the striking. I mean, it was a great round for Derek Brunson, and he just looked very composed as you go into round 2. But then round 2, it was a lot different of a story, and I'm still not entirely sure what happened, because Brunson kind of just lost it all. I don't know if he got hurt with something and he was just something happened. Either he got hurt or he started to gas out a little bit or something. Mm-hmm. But he kind of just became a bit of a prone target, wasn't shooting for takedowns, and Cannonier, having that power and obviously being the better striker, started to land some bombs, and then eventually they were in kind of a clinch. Really nice elbow, and Brunson was pretty much out on his feet. I think the fight could have been stopped there, but instead, Cannonier kind of gets him to the ground, smashes him with 4 elbows.
I mean, Brunson's corner threw the towel in, guys.
I mean, that was something that shit you ain't seen since the Gracies and Shamrocks were fighting.
Yeah.
And ref finally steps in. A brutal finish. I guess if you're Cannonier, it's kind of one that you're somewhat thankful for, because again, it at least inspires some confidence in, like, okay, this guy is serious about getting that title shot.
Yes.
But those were just sort of the round by round, the minute by minute thoughts I was kind of having while watching. Dominic, anything differently you were seeing, or anything that stood out to you about either Cannonier's win or Brunson's ultimate loss here?
No, I think you hit it on the head on every detail. I mean, when you're looking at a number 1 contender fight, this is what this was. That's why it was perfect that they placed it on this card. That's how you go out and prove you're up next. When you do something like that in that brutal fashion against a guy that was on a 5-fight win streak, that's impressive for Jared Cannonier. He's won 2 in a row. It's finally time because he's been there before. He's been right there with Israel Adesanya within reach, and he loses. But this time, he stacked the wins together. He made a statement with this one. He's all 100% next for Izzy. And Izzy has wanted this fight for a while. It's a fresh matchup, as we've already talked about previously. So I think that's a really fun fight. Cannonier looked good, but he did have that bad first round. And while I know Brunson is not the same style of fighter as Izzy, it still just makes me wonder, okay, Cannonier did get the knockout, but he still showed some weaknesses, got dropped on the feet by Brunson, who's not known as a striker. Now you got to go fight one of the best strikers we've ever seen. It's an uphill battle for Cannonier. It is. But when you have that equalizer at middleweight, which there's definitely knockout artists in this weight class, but he just has this force about him, man, where he connects and you like feel it when you're watching. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be there, even in a fight with Izzy. So I'm very much intrigued. Again, it's a fresh matchup, which is always fun. And for Brunson, for what it's worth, the blonde Brunson train comes to an end after 5. I rode with him as long as I could. It's tough to see him go out. He said he was all good after the fight. He said, it's time, one more. We're going to go out. We're going to get one more fight in and kind of take a back seat and hit the road for retirement. So shout out to Derrick Brunson. I can't wait to see who that retirement fight may come against, but the night belongs to Cannonier.
That was a nice way. I appreciated you throwing in that at the end for Derrick Brunson. Derrick Brunson deserves some respect, man.
He very underrated career, I think.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. He had his low moments in his career, but I especially think this late run he had. He had really reinvented himself, and to come so close to a title fight for him, Derrick Brunson, the guy who, was seemingly at one point just the guy you kind of fed to someone who was, ready to make a jump into the top 10 or something. Izzy, Robert Whittaker, guys like that had kind of done. Very impressive.
Well, real quick, sorry, while we're shining on Brunson, one of the OGs from Strikeforce. People forget he's one of the few remaining.
Very, very much so. Yeah, I kind of forget that he even fought for Strikeforce, honestly, just because. Yeah,
there's not many left.
I don't know how many are left, but wow, that's very interesting. Now, I will mention for Cannonier, my big point to you, because you were kind of talking about this before we started recording about, the fact that Brunson did look good early. Cannonier just looking like, it's not even that Cannonier necessarily looked bad. It's just that obviously wasn't going his way. He was stopping some takedowns, doing a good job at that, but then he was obviously very mindful of the takedowns, and I think it kind of prevented him from really getting his offense going. And then Brunson was having success on the feet, so not a great start. But I understand where you kind of look at that and you're like, I mean, even though he had a good win, a really good finish to the fight, hard to look at the fight as a whole and necessarily say like it improved his chance, like in your eyes, against Adesanya.
Yeah.
My only response to that would be, it really didn't matter how Cannonier won this fight, or Derrick Brunson for that matter. I had a hard time. I'm going to have a hard time really seeing them as like, I mean, they're deserving contenders. Like they deserve to get the title fight if they had won. And for Cannonier, winning, I think he deserves it. But I'm gonna have a hard time when that fight comes believing Cannonier has much of a chance.
Well, I agree.
And considering the style of Brunson in this fight, Brunson relentless with the takedowns. Obviously not going to be the matchup when he fights Israel Adesanya. But you do have a point. He gets wobbled, dropped by an uppercut from Derek Brunson, who is not near the striker of Israel Adesanya. Cannonier is just someone I've had a hard time really figuring out.
Yeah, right. We talked about that on Friday, you know.
He's just like I know he's very good. I know he's powerful. I know he's got some good speed. I know he's good. It's just hard for me to really evaluate, where is his strengths lie? Where is he really good at? And, it should be noted, what a story for Jared Cannonier to kind of get this title fight potentially, because this is a guy who was one of the most famous alum, Dominic, from one of our favorite side promotions, Alaska Fighting Championship.
Yeah, that's true.
And at one point was a truck driver in Alaska.
Yeah.
Started training. It makes his way through the ranks. Starts as a heavyweight. Goes down to light heavyweight. Finds himself at middleweight.
Crazy.
And now at 37, 38 years old, he's about to fight for a title potentially. It gets one of the best of all time. I mean, it's a great story.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if there's going to be a happy ending to that story. But, maybe this is a happy ending of itself. Just getting here. Getting to that point.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about the co-main event now.
Swing and bang, baby.
Swing and bang. Tai Tuivasa and Derrick Lewis. This was the fight that people kept throwing that cursed phrase around. No way this goes the distance.
Yeah.
But it didn't go to distance as Tai Tuivasa gets the knockout over Derrick Lewis.
Not a TKO.
KO.
Yes.
Round 2, 1 minute 40 seconds in. And you kind of said it right up top. I mean, swing and bang. And, it's kind of it's really the fight we expected. So I'm going to, Dominic, this felt like a fight where Derrick Lewis looking for redemption in his home state.
I know,
being
man.
That he was coming off that loss to the interim title fight against Ciryl Gane. Here he is against a guy a little bit lower ranked, Tai Tuivasa, but surging. So I guess for you watching this fight, anything that really surprised you here, and what are your kind of takeaways now that Tai Tuivasa is jumping into the really front of the line for the contenders?
This was one of those fights we've had on the show where it got announced and we're like, huh? I mean, I'm here for it, but
I was very surprised.
We're talking Dominic Cruz, Casey Kenny stuff from back in the day on the show. But what a fight. They delivered. And we kind of talked about on Friday too. While it's a fan favorite, two guys that are going to go in there, they're going to put on a show, they're going to get paid. It's a good fight for both guys. There was a lot on the line for Derrick Lewis because, he's losing to a young up-and-comer, yes, but he was number 11. And he's gonna really if you're Derrick and wanting to get back into title of the picture, which he doesn't really seem all that interested in, honestly. If I'm to be truthful with you, this hurts him. I don't know if we're ever going to see Lewis back in those title talks. But for Tai Tuivasa, what a story too. We're talking Jared Cannonier storylines. Bring it in here with Tai. Starts his UFC career 3-0, then loses 3 in a row. Gets kind of cut, but not really cut. But then he surges. He's won 5 in a row. All 5 via knockout. This one by far the biggest of his career. We're talking we've got a star in the making here at heavyweight, people. We really do. And if you would have told me in 2021, or even before this fight got announced, as soon as that happened, that Tai Tuivasa would be a title contender before the spring of this year, I mean, he's 1 win away from a title fight. We could very well be seeing, I'm not matchmaking, but I just saw someone tweet about this, so I have to bring it up. We could see Tai Tuivasa face Ciryl Gane next. I would have never thought I would put those two men in the same sentence with one another. And here we are, man. So what a win for Bam Bam. By the way, faced adversity big time in the first round. Nearly got finished. Anyone else probably goes out from those shots. So he's eating them, and he's giving them back. And that short elbow to put Derrick Lewis out cold, Bam Bam got some damn power, my friend. Woo!
On the round table, we talked about sloppy fights. I mean, this was it was sloppy, but I mean, it was awesome.
It was.
These two just threw everything they had at one another. When Lewis when Lewis had Tuivasa hurt bad, like
Oh,
coming off of when he had the trip takedown,
yes.
and then when Tuivasa's getting back up and he's just, that's when Lewis is like his most dangerous, when he kind of gets you like off your feet and then he starts just throwing fucking haymakers as you're trying to climb your way back up to your feet. So he's doing that, and Tuivasa's just hurt. And Tuivasa's response is just to start swinging those arms, man. He just starts throwing, and I was like, "Oh God, this is over. This is over." And it wasn't. It wasn't. Somehow, I mean, his chin holds up. You know, I loved this fight. It was great. It was so much fun. Two guys that are fan favorites, and I know it's sad for Derrick Lewis.
It is,
because you're kind of right. Even though Derrick Lewis lost in pretty one-sided fashion to Ciryl Gane, you know, there still was a route for him to potentially get a title fight because he does have a win over Francis Ngannou technically.
Yeah.
And not only that, but just the idea of those two fighting again, it felt very much like a fight that people would want to see. It was a fight people wanted to see last summer. Why wouldn't they want to see it now, you know?
Yeah.
And even if he were to get a fight with like Stipe or someone, like, you know, those seem like good fights.
Yes.
With this loss, I don't necessarily close the door on it. But again, it's all about like how long does he really want to keep going, and because you're right. I mean, he's one of those guys that, funny enough, both of these guys in this fight are like not into fighting like as a sport. Like
they're prize fighters.
They do it as their job. They don't really give a shit about watching it or following it.
Yep.
And I respect them for being like that. I do see Tuivasa having a little more motivation for a belt than Derrick.
You have to now.
Derrick seems to be a little bit more about like whatever gets his money up.
Yes.
And I'm sure Tuivasa is like that too, but he does seem at least somewhat motivated by getting a belt, you know. So it is just, to me, this Tuivasa is 2022's version for us of Beneil Dariush last year, where we were very high supporters of him, just like, guys, we love this guy. We want you guys to like show him support. And then out of nowhere, he kind of just jumped to the top of the ranks, and that was even higher than we thought they were capable of. And it's like, well, now are we going to become detractors, or are we going to keep riding with them? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, now is it all of a sudden going to be like, well, you can't give Tuivasa a title shot, even though we were guys that were all on the train. You know, we were the conductors like just a week ago. But let me just say for now, I don't know what your takeaways can really be from this fight. I mean, it was what you expected. Two guys, high power, that, you know, loved to stand and trade. They did it. They did it for a round and a half. It was fun. But, like, the idea of Tuivasa fighting Ciryl Gane, I mean, I don't see that fight going any different than Ciryl Gane's win over Derrick Lewis.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say like what's really next, because it was interesting though. Dana White mentioned Tai Tuivasa along with the names Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic, and John Jones.
It's like one of these things doesn't belong, you know.
But I mean, he's not a guy you can count. It's very much like Derrick Lewis. I mean, he is very much like Derrick Lewis being in this title picture, except I would argue he has a more well-rounded striking skill set.
Yeah.
So he's a threat for sure, and yes, maybe it is a bit of like the one punch, the knockout threat, but in the heavyweight division, that is more relevant than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So this idea that like it's some sort of joke that he would be in a, you know, if he were to get Stipe or John Jones next, as crazy as that sounds, he is a threat.
Oh yes.
Do I necessarily think he's going to win those fights? Probably not. But I'm just saying that he is a definite threat, not just like and yes, you could say, oh, it's just a puncher's chance. But again, at heavyweight, that is the most relevant division for a puncher's chance. And, you know, this is just a big win for him because both these guys were kind of stars in their own right, very popular. Tuivasa has been really riding a wave of momentum, and this is the most legitimate win of his career. A big jump up, and he passed the test. He did some shoeies on the way out. Massive L to the cameraman who missed the shoey on top of the cage. Massive L. But I don't know what else to really say about it. Like, it's just, I can't wait to be shocked by what fight he gets put in
I
next.
know, dude, because whoever it's going to be, even though we know the list is short, we're going to be like, holy shit, this is the fight announcement.
Just can't believe that it's going to actually be announced. Like, you just can't believe it. You know?
And if he wins, it's a title. Like, let's be honest here, people. I think regardless of like where John Jones fits in and Stipe and Cyril Gane still, if he can win a 6th in a row, especially if he finishes it with the star power and you said the momentum, he's going to get a title fight. And it's going to be nuts. If that's
Can I just
the
say,
case.
heavyweight does feel like it's in kind of a very exciting part of its.
It's
of
very
its history.
fresh.
Now I know we have the whole title situation that's kind of putting a damper on things, but you do have Ngannou as a champion as of now, who is
a big deal.
Big deal. You still have Stipe kind of at the end of his run. John Jones potentially is coming in to make a big debut and one of the best fighters in UFC history. Then you got now Tai Tuivasa, who's a very exciting power puncher. Cyril Gane, we still stand by.
He's
I would
still
say,
there. Yes,
the most well-rounded heavyweight perhaps in UFC history. But then Tom Aspinall on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
You got Curtis Blaydes still in there. Yeah. Derrick Lewis may be kind of falling out now, but then Alexander Volkov is still around.
Rosenstruik's there.
Rosenstruik's there, and then you got Chris Daukaus, who still has a lot of potential.
Yep.
So I would definitely go. And then you got like Alexander Romanov, if you want to go a little lower. He's a guy a lot of people are excited about. So this heavyweight division is very much looking like it's going to be in a very fun place moving forward, even if we might get some wacky-ass matchups now that Tai Tuivasa shocked the world.
Exactly.
Let's get into the rest, because there's still a lot to go over here.
Oh, there is.
It was a tough card to really cut out anything.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt me to cut out my boy Andrei Arlovsky. Shout out to him.
Yeah.
Gained another win. And
3 in a row.
Easiest money I ever made. Andrei Arlovsky by decision.
It almost wasn't, though.
Well, split decision. But, that's Texas for you.
Right.
So let's start with Renato Moicano, because he gets a submission win over Alexander Hernandez, 1:23 of round number 2. Moicano should be very happy that this fight got bumped up to the main card at the last second, thanks to his opponent. Well, I don't know if it's really thanks to. I don't know. Basically, Alexander Hernandez complained about being on the prelims, so then they swapped his fight with Moicano and then the Kyler Phillips Marcelo Rojo fight and put the one on the main card. So I don't know if it's because Hernandez complained, but I'm just saying that because Hernandez did throw a bit of a fit about it, and then he got smashed.
It's the most Alexander Hernandez thing ever, though. Let's be honest.
I don't want to be a hater, but also
he doesn't make it easy to like.
He does. He really doesn't, because he goes quiet. Like the Donald Cerrone thing was a bad look, right?
Yeah.
He was like, he had some really great one-liners in the build-up, and you're kind of like, oh shit, like this. Not to mention that this guy his debut was knocking out Beneil Dariush.
Yeah, don't forget he hasn't lost since, Beneil,
and he beat, and I think he followed that up with, I don't know if he knocked him out or just beat Olivier Aubin Mercier, who is still a good fighter in the PFL. But then, he gets that Donald Cerrone fight. Talked a lot of shit, and Donald Cerrone smashed him.
Yeah.
And then he kind of went quiet, went back, and started just doing his thing. And, I was kind of like, okay, this kid's just going to,
He learned,
I don't know if I should call him a kid. He's probably older than me. But he, it felt like, okay, maybe he learned a lesson. Now he's just going to, put his head down, get to work. Yeah. And then here, he kind of did it again. And he got smashed.
He did.
And I'm not even going to really focus on him here, because this is obviously a tough loss for Alexander Hernandez. And, to me, he at this point is kind of in a pretender status for me. Where he's a guy that'll show some potential, but, he's getting beat pretty badly in these
when
fights.
He loses.
Yeah, like, the Drew Dober fight was one that he had some moments in, but Drew Dober looked so fucking good in that fight where he got the win. So here, Renato Moicano, who is another guy that for a long time people had high hopes for, and he has a resume that really fills out. But because of the high hopes that I think even the UFC had for him, he was kind of fed to some into some really tough
The
matchups.
Wolves. Yeah.
But here, I mean, this is the most complete performance I've ever seen from Renato
He looked
Moicano.
good.
Not only with the fact that he got that submission win, and we know how good his submissions are, his jiu-jitsu is, but on the feet, Dominic, the setup for the submission win here, oh my gosh, the combination to get this fight to ultimately the finish was amazing. Yeah. And I can't believe it. I hate that this guy's getting kind of overlooked here, because I'll tell you what I've been doing on my Excel sheet, that I
love you and your Excel sheet.
So, for a long time when I was going back and watching old cards, I was tracking my fight of the night, looking at the main card. What was my fight of the night? What was my favorite fight to watch on here? Well, now I'm doing my fighter of the night. So now when I'm watching, I'm like, okay, who on the main card was the biggest standout? And on pay-per-views, a lot of times it's like when a title changes hands, okay, usually the guy winning the belt is probably the fighter of the night. But when I was doing it last night, I'm like looking, I'm like, I think I'm going with Renato Moicano.
Yeah.
And I get it. Cannonier, big performance. Tai Tuivasa, big performance. Izzy gets a win. And then you even got Bobby Green to open the main card.
I know.
Renato Moicano, being that he was a guy that at one time had a lot of potential, still does, but is kind of, came back down to earth. And then he puts up this, and this was like a complete
his best
showing.
Yes.
I think he deserves a lot of praise. And he followed it up with an awesome post-fight interview that, may not have earned him any favors with the UFC, but should at least get him maybe a pretty decent opponent for his next one.
Yeah, what a performance! I love how passionate you were for this. You took it away. I have no more words other than it really was the most complete we've seen him, and it showed me a lot, about how he's continuing to improve even after the win-loss, all that stuff. So.
And as passionate as I was about it, I will say I'm still fearful to get too invested in him, because
of course.
We've been here before with Moicano. Maybe not, again, I've never seen him look that good, but there was a point in time where he was being matched up with Jose Aldo, and we didn't know who was going to win that fight. That was the reality at one point in time.
Yeah.
So I'm a little fearful to get too, invested again, but I definitely want to see what's next.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we'll just leave it there. So, Bobby Green got the unanimous decision win over Nasrat Haqparast.
What a dog!
What a fight! Really,
yeah, it was a good fight.
And again, Bobby Green at 35 years old, Dominic, this renaissance to his career, and it kind of continued here. Did this fight go how you thought? And if so, what really do we have here with Bobby Green? I think it's fair to kind of ask that question now.
Yeah, this did go how I thought. Like at first, I think I even said on Friday, I was like, oh man, plus money on Nasrat. I think he's a well-rounded guy. I might sprinkle it. The day went on, and I'm like, Bobby Green, man. He, especially after that win against Raging Al. Damn. He's just such a good boxer. Like the rest of his skill set's not like incredible, but damn, he is so good on the feet and so fun to watch, and just what a positive outlook on life. And every time he does a post-fight interview, I want to run through a brick wall. What a beast that Bobby Green is. But Noah, he's won 5 out of his last 7 fights, and the 2 losses were tough fights. He went back and forth with Rafael Fiziev was like one of the low-key fights of the year from last year.
Thiago
Moises. So, the guy's schedule, especially of late, has been very good. And I think just because, he's 10-7 in the UFC. He's been fighting for so long, but he's still only 35. So I'm not saying there's like a title run in him, but there's room for him to really make noise in like the back half of these rankings and potentially, shake up some of these prospects that we've talked about so much. I saw someone even call for him versus Brad Riddell. Yes, please.
Perfect.
Because not only would that be an amazing fight, but Bobby Green, a chance to get back into the rankings, which he's earned and deserves it. Dude, the guy just keeps not even reinventing the wheel, but just showing that his skill set on the feet. He's one of the best overall boxers in 155 pounds, and how good this weight class is. It's crazy.
I love the idea of Bobby Green having this role as like as like a guy brought in to shake things up. You got all these prospects in the back half who kind of, they're all like, hey, we're gonna make our way to the top.
He can play spoiler.
Yeah, he played a spoiler, man.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he is good enough to beat any of those guys on any night, and also he could lose to any of them on any given night. You look at how good he fought Rafael Fiziev. Even in a loss, that still might be my favorite performance out of Bobby Green, because nobody thought he was going to have much of a chance there.
No.
And he took Fiziev to the brink. And that's what I really want to see him do if he fights a guy like Brad Riddell. I'm not saying he has to win, but to kind of make these guys that are so young, so less experienced, have to really dig deep and pull something out that they didn't even know they had. You've seen a lot of the best fighters of all time kind of are faced with that sort of fight, that moment where they have to really dig deep, And,
divisions need a guy like Bobby Green.
Yeah, and I love that the fans were behind him here.
Yes,
kind of makes me think that maybe there is something to Bobby Green that, like, I think he could headline a fight night almost. Like,
Hell yeah!
I really want to support this guy, and his fight style is very exciting, very good boxing. I mean, I remember my mom was talking about it as we were watching. She's like, "Why is his hand so low?" And I'm like, "'Cause he's fucking good, man."
Yeah, like, he doesn't stop, non-stop for 3 rounds, and I know he could do it for 5. I've never seen him get tired, so I have no doubt he could go 5 rounds.
Yeah. Following that, Dominic, Casey O'Neill, one of probably the biggest prospects on the card.
Yes.
And she was faced with the retiring OG of the fight game, Roxanne Modafferi. She does get the win via split decision, but ultimately was a pretty clear win, I would say.
Yeah.
So, Dominic, I'm going to be up front. Out of all the fights on this card, I don't know if I mentioned this on Friday. I was watching a lot of the prelims on my phone. A lot of my family got COVID around Christmas time, so this was when we did Christmas, basically. So I was visiting family, and then we were out to eat pizza for a little bit. So I was watching the fights on my phone. Unfortunately, there was like this time frame where I wasn't watching, and that was during the Casey O'Neill, Roxanne Modafferi fight. So unfortunately, I kind of missed it. But I want you to kind of give your thoughts, considering you're very high on Casey O'Neill. Did she pass this test in your eyes?
Yeah, so low-key, like, for me, the fight of the night was Tai Tuivasa and Derrick Lewis. Obviously, that fight was insane. Swing and bang, right? But this one was a good fight, man. I don't care what anybody says. Roxanne Modafferi, no matter if she's winning or losing, she's giving 110% effort. She is a hard out for anyone. So I was hesitant to even pick Casey O'Neill because we've seen Roxanne play spoiler to people like Macy Barber. But Casey O'Neill is good. She is good, and she needed a test like this. She was 3-0. She finished everyone. Yeah, she's had a little adversity, but I knew she wasn't going to come in here and just steamroll Roxanne. It wasn't going to happen. She was going to have to go 3 full rounds and show a full skill set, and that's what she did. She broke the record for most significant strikes landed in a women's flyweight fight last night, and she did it in 3 rounds. It was like over 150 strikes. It was crazy.
Wow.
So the output from both was just back and forth. There was over 650 total strikes thrown between the two. It was nuts. They didn't stop for 15 minutes. People were booing Casey at the end, maybe because it was Roxanne's retirement fight. You never like to see people lose when they're leaving. But I was like, guys, what are we doing? This is one of like the biggest prospects in the UFC. Come on, cut it out. So
I agree, but also didn't you? I heard she has been kind of trying to embrace being the villain. Have you been hearing any of that?
I noticed like leading into this fight, not necessarily like being a heel toward the fans, but in her mindset, she's like, she felt almost disrespected is with the vibe I got going into this fight because she's like, everybody's talking about Roxanne. It's her, it's her send off. It's her retirement fight. But I'm the future now. I'm here. It's my turn. You should be talking about me. And that's what she went out and she was yelling at Roxanne in the second round. I'm like, holy shit, chill out. So I wanted to see this from Casey. I didn't want to see some easy, she goes in and gets a finish. I wanted to see, she's 24. You have to be faced with adversity. That's what she did. And she won this fight. She's going to move up a couple spots, still kind of in that 10 to 15 range, but she's inching closer and closer and kind of beginning to separate a little from the rest of those flyweight prospects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And, getting past this hurdle that can be Roxanne Modafferi, who is one of the most unassuming fighters on the whole roster, but
Yes.
always brings she's never an easy out, basically.
Mm-hmm.
She's always a tough one out. So it's a good win for Casey O'Neill. And the funny part that I had heard about this whole villain thing, this embracing this kind of heel thing, is, apparently Joanne Wood does not like Casey O'Neill very much. And when Ariel asked her why, apparently it's because whenever Casey O'Neill goes to the PI, she parks in the handicap parking spots.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, what a heel move, Dom!
Come on, Casey.
So when I heard that, I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, I get it. That is. I get it. That's stupid. It's dumb.
Yeah.
You don't park in handicap parking spots if you.
Yes.
But it was just so trivial, just so funny to me. I just want her to embrace being a heel of everyday life annoyances or something. I want her to be the someone who crop dusts people when she's walking past them in grocery stores. Just be a heel to the everyday man. Just
right.
The little things, beat a person when you finish a gallon of milk, you put the empty gallon back in the fridge or something, or carton,
or you just drink out of the gallon in general and put it back.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny, but I'm glad to see. I'm glad to see that Roxanne did get kind of a good send off here. She looked good on her way out. She fought hard. Even got one of the judges to score to fight for her, even if that was a bit rudimentary, but. Casey being the future, being so bright looking in the future, good win.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Kyler Phillips submits Marcelo Rojo round 3, minute 48. This was a fight a lot of people were very excited for. Obviously, Kyler Phillips, people are very high on, and rightfully so. But Marcelo Rojo being a guy that just is one of those killer be killed types.
Yep.
And I think that kind of showed here. But I do think Kyler Phillips definitely showing how good he really is with this performance.
Yeah, Kyler looked so good when he first got to the UFC, but then he lost to Raulian Paiva. It was a close fight, but he gassed. You kind of saw some weaknesses. I just had a gut feeling that he was gonna. I'm not even going toward the bet.
No, I want to bring it. I want to talk about it.
Well, first off, where I was going though was I just knew he was going to bounce back. I thought he was going to look really good, and he did, didn't he? He looked like a stud last night. But if you want me to bring it up,
let's air it out. Let's air it out.
Okay.
All right?
So if you don't know, we have a betting show called The Nosebleeds that airs on Thursdays on YouTube. Check it out if you haven't. It's the best betting show that there is. Anyway, and we've been on fire lately. Hopefully that doesn't end. But I'm taking my notes. What bets do I like? And Rojo had lost 4 fights via submission and 2 via decision. And there was a bet on DraftKings. It was weird. It wasn't like a double chance or anything where it's by finish, but it was Kyler Phillips by submission or decision plus 130. And I'm like, I like this. Plus money. Kyler doesn't really submit people, but I could see it happening in this one. But then me and Noah kind of went back and forth off recording. I'm like, what do you think, man? Do I do this? Do I do a prop bet? And then I ended up just putting Kyler on the parlay and taking Ronnie Lawrence off. Of course, Ronnie wins, and I could have had more money is what I'm going with here. But it was just funny how we kind of went about it, and Noah and I went back and forth in our group text last night. I'm not mad, Noah, for what it's worth.
You're holding back on the details. You're holding back on the details.
Okay, you can fill them in with any more. Go ahead. This is your time. Take the floor.
Oh, Dominic blamed me for
I didn't
not winning.
Blame you.
He literally threw me under the bus in our group chat. He said, Noah, you are the worst better.
I did not say this.
No, basically, how I remember it was me and Dominic share the bets that we're planning to place before we film or record the nosebleeds. Because what we're trying to get in a good habit of doing is basically we give our bets to each other and then we place them.
Right.
I'm going to hold off on saying because I don't want to implicate anybody here.
Right.
we place them so that way we're giving the accurate odds on DraftKings.
Yes.
Yeah, because the first couple weeks we were newbies at this, so we were like saying them, but then we weren't placing the bets till like Saturday.
Then the odds would change.
Odds would change. You don't want to.
Yeah.
I think it's just good practice. When
Yes.
you're sharing your picks with an audience, you should already have those picks in place. So Dominic's sharing his with me, and I can't remember exactly. So you had mentioned that play for Kyler Phillips, decision or submission, and I was like surprised. I was like, oh, you think a submission win? And I thought, and if I remember right, you were like, well, I think it's going to go to a decision, but you're like, I just like the plus odds.
Yeah.
And you're like, and I think Rojo has been submitted a few times.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if you think it's going to go to a decision, you'll get even better odds if you pick it to go to a decision.
Yeah.
And you were like kind of looking at it. And then I really liked Mana Martinez as an underdog. I
against
my
Ronnie.
Dog of the week.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, Dom, I'm like, if you like him, I mean, you could always just put him on your parlay and take out Ronnie Lawrence or somebody. And Dominic took my advice.
I just badly wanted something with Kyler.
No. Let me be.
Oh, sorry.
It wasn't advice.
Right. We don't give advice.
I simply was just telling him. I was just observing. Like he was telling, and like I was just kind of saying like what I would have done. And now I went 0 for 8 on college basketball bets yesterday. Yeah. So the fact that Dominic listened to me is kind of incriminating on himself.
Fair enough.
But he did make sure to let me know that I was a terrible friend and that I costed him money. But I'm glad that we were able to kind of move on from it.
Right. And at the end of the day, all that matters, the nosebleeds was a hell of a week.
But it is nuts that he did get a submission win. When that happened, though, I did kind of go like, fuck, I did really.
I saw it, I remember sitting there and I was like, I knew it. It was going to happen. But at the end of the day, Kyler Phillips looked fucking really good.
No, he did look good. And the fact that I didn't see it coming and he looked so comfortable.
Yeah,
there was just very telling because this is a guy that I've always been impressed with the striking. It's always been his nickname's Matrix, I believe. I mean, the guy just looks so smooth, and yet he looks the same way when the fight goes to the ground when he's going for submissions.
And he's only 26.
Okay. Ooh. I'm very much on board with what's next for him. I already have been, but that loss to Paiva might have made people kind of hesitant, but that was such a close fight, and Paiva's good. So let's see what's next for him. But I think he's got to be right there for top 15 again.
Oh yeah, for sure. I thought somebody just ran into the door.
Yeah, I'm not sure what just happened, but moving on.
Oh,
Ronnie Lawrence. Yeah, Ronnie Lawrence. He does get a unanimous decision win over Mana Martinez and Dominic. This was one of the wild fights of the night.
Yeah.
How many knockdowns were in this fight?
17. Yeah.
A great fight. I was kind of siding with Mana Martinez, but Ronnie Lawrence looked really good here. I gotta admit, he did look really good. So, was there anything that surprised you about this one? Did Martinez put up a better fight than you thought, or? We've already kind of known Ronnie Lawrence to be a bit of a dog, so no surprise there, right?
Yeah, Mana just put up a way tougher fight. He almost finished Ronnie in the third round. I think he knocked him down a couple times himself, and then he got knocked down early on in the fight too. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you said, Ronnie, we talked about it on the nosebleeds. He just does have that dog in him, and he did it again here. He was a minus 300 plus favorite going into this. Which that's why you picked Mana as your dog of the week. You're like, damn, Ronnie's good, but I could see this going Martinez's way, and it almost did. But it was just a really fun scrap. And Ronnie Lawrence, he's just a tough out for anyone. And I just kind of want to see what could his ceiling be. I want to see him stay active, keep fighting, and maybe he does crack into the rankings here in the foreseeable future. He's just a fun fighter, that fight style that you like to see.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. And, Ronnie Lawrence, I think that makes him – I think he might have lost his debut in the UFC. But
he's on a streak. Though.
He's 3-1, I think.
Yeah.
So he's definitely someone to be on the lookout for because he kind of gets it done in all ways. He's a guy that very well-rounded. And,
Yes.
you know, this Mana Martinez might not be the toughest fight that he'll have coming up, but it definitely was a performance where, you know, it definitely pleasantly surprised with just how good Ronnie Lawrence really is, I think, at this point. And I think he's another guy that could be very much knocking on the door, top 15.
Yeah, for sure.
This is kind of why this card was so good on paper to me, is that you know, whenever we go back and look at these old cards that we used to watch at B-dubs or at your basement or whatever, and we'll look low on the prelims and we'll see guys that are eventually champions, and we're like, man, I don't even remember like giving those guys any credit when they were fighting. This card felt like there's a few of those on here. Like those guys that are going to really have big fights ahead of them, you know?
Yeah, I like that.
The last couple here, this was the fight of the night by the UFC. It was a wild one. I don't think either of us would have gave it fight of the night, but hey, awesome fight. Douglas Silva de Andrade gets to come from behind win via submission over Sergey Morozov, round 2, 3 minutes, 24 seconds in. A tale of two rounds.
Yeah, exactly.
like the other fights. So De Andrade is a tank. I mean, this guy looks. I can't help but look at this guy and he looks like a smaller version of TRT Vitor. I mean,
I was about to say, John Anik said going into his last fight, he had an 11-week training camp. Over that course, he had to drop 47 pounds to make weight. He's a beast.
It's insane. And you know what? You know, like it's like Austin Powers with. You ever watch Austin Powers? Or I'm not going to ask if you've ever watched it. I know you haven't. But you know the mini me and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Douglas Silva de Andrade is the mini me for TRT Vitor.
Holy shit!
They literally look just alike, man.
That's true.
It is like I couldn't get past it, but. He does. He is like very underrated. I mean, that's
he's like 36 years old too.
Yeah, I mean, he gave a tough fight to a debuting. Fuck, I can't remember who I was gonna say. You know what? It doesn't matter. But basically, he's very underrated and has been. Honestly, his record's very good.
It is.
He's been very good in this division, and yet just hasn't really gotten the credit, I guess, that he's really due. And here it looked early, like, again, I was kind of thinking Morozov was going to win this fight, and I just thought his ceiling's a little higher. He's a fresh face. You know, he's a guy that was really good for the promotion that, like, now I can't think of the
You're struggling on this one. Dude, but Morozov looked amazing in that first round. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, it was very impressive.
And then the second
I almost
round
said KSW, but that's not what it was. Anyways, Douglas Silva de Andrade does have the big comeback in round 2. It was just a really fun fight, but it was one where it felt like each round was like pretty much in one guy's favor.
Yes. That's the only way to put it, truthfully.
So it's like kind of hard to say it was like the fight of the night, in my opinion. But hey, all respect to these two. Get that $50K. And I still am excited to see what's next for Morozov, too.
Me too, man. Yeah, I know he got finished here, but you said...
Apparently, his story, he's like a former soccer player, and then he started training MMA, I think, when he was like 19. And he was 10 years later, and he's in the UFC.
I mean, his grappling looked great. His striking was top tier. I mean, he got clipped bad in the second round because of Andrade's power, and he ended up getting submitted, but... it wasn't like a bad loss by any means, in my opinion. I think he still has a good future.
I was a little surprised that we were going to talk about this one, but the opening fight of the night, Jeremiah Wells submits Blood Diamond. A lot of submissions on this card, by the way. He gets it done, 4 minutes, 38 seconds around number 1. Now, going into this fight, I kind of looked at I think Jeremiah Wells is a guy to look out for. I thought that going in. His debut, Warley Alves, a very tough opponent to debut against, and he smashed him. But then you add this fight where he's going up against a 3-0, 31-year-old Blood Diamond. Well, that's not the name. Mike Mathitha.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is this fight being booked? I was kind of confused. And then I started hearing about Izzy, what he was talking about. And he built a lot of hype for Blood Diamond.
He did.
Debut. Yeah. And now, Dominic, did the debut live up to the expectations, or was there a little bit left to be desired there?
Yeah, that's definitely the latter, and it's not to even Blood Diamond's detriment. I mean, he's a kickboxer. He's newer to MMA, and when you're a guy like Jeremiah Wells, he's super well rounded, man. We're talking like powerful striking, but you're not gonna stay on the feet with
apparently
kickboxing.
He has over 100 kickboxing fights.
Jeremiah or Blood Diamond?
Blood Diamond.
Yeah. So I mean, there you go. Why would I want to stay on the feet with this guy? Yeah. I'll use my grappling. This is MMA at the end of the day, and that's what worked. And truthfully, again, hindsight, when you're talking about the nosebleeds, Jeremiah Wells by submission looked pretty good when you think about it. But he just had a really good performance. He didn't even look bad on the feet. I mean, he was getting the best of Blood Diamond everywhere. It was a big, yes, it was the first fight of the night, but it's a big debut for Blood Diamond when you've got Izzy hyping you up at the press conference like that. And I don't think it's like, oh, he came in, he lost. I'm still excited to like see him get matched up again. It's just like, let's pump the brakes on the styles because Jeremiah Wells, as you said, he's 2-0 in the UFC, but he's from the Contender Series. I think he got a finish on that show. He's a stud, like a force to be reckoned with and a prospect, to say the least.
Well, Blood Diamond, for sure, I want to see him get a matchup against someone more, Jeremiah Wells was a very tough debut to have to go up against. So, considering especially how limited the MMA experience is for Blood Diamond. I mean, yes, kickboxing aside, but very much excited to see what's next for him, for sure.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the MMA Weekend Recap. That one went a little bit longer than I thought, but a lot of takeaways, man. And we want to hear from you. What were your takeaways? What fight stood out to you? Who was your fighter of the night? Let us know. Voice message. We'll plug that all right now, but we'll be back on Thursday for nosebleeds, and then obviously we'll be dropping a weekend preview on Friday. So until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram at dsleep14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with the podcast with us on Twitter, on Instagram at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And as for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at ntbaker_. If you go to the link in my bio, there is a link tree, which presents you a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes...
It's not limited to.
The Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast. It's all on there, baby. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor.
That's right.
Shout out to Anchor.
Shout out.
And the way that you can leave your thoughts is with one of these two links, leaving a voice message.
It's such a cool feature, guys. Come on.
Up to 60 seconds. Just let us know your thoughts from this card. Anything about, what's next for some of these guys. How do you see Adesanya Cannonier potentially going?
Yeah.
How does Tuivasa fare with the top of the heavyweight division? Just let us know your thoughts. We'll feature it on the future episode of the show. Give our opinions on your thoughts, and we can have a discussion just that way, Up to 60 seconds, or if you would rather not do the voice thing, you can always leave a comment on YouTube. I think there's a section to pose a question on Spotify.
Yep.
We obviously have a Instagram and Twitter. You can respond there as well, and we can have a discussion there. So just any way to kind of improve. We just want to, have a discussion with you guys. So
yep.
A lot of ways to do so. And also there's a link on there if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. We just appreciate any and all support. But that's it. We're out. And we'll see y'all on Thursday.